Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
They know where you live. They feed on your flaws. They drain your time. And they never leave you alone.
Hey, I need to run a few errands. Can you watch my dog? Again.
Yeah, I tell you, that's everybody has one of those people in their life. This series that we're doing is talking about relational vampires, right? And they're the people that suck the life out of you. You know what you're talking about. When you've seen those people, they come and you see them coming and you're just like, when you see them start walking towards you, there are people in your life that do that. Last couple weeks ago, we talked about controlling people. How do you deal with controlling people? People that there's only one way to do it. It's ordained by God, and they wrote the book on it. And if you don't do it their way, then you've got a problem. We all have those people in our lives that are always in it. We talked about the difference between authority and control. Authority is something that's defined, that's limited, and it's given. Controlling people, the controlling spirit, it's undefined, it's unlimited, it's always taken. It might be your shoes one week. The next week it might be, the way you make bread. I don't know. It's always something that somebody's got to control because, the personal preference has become a mandate from God, on something that people just step into that. And it's a difficult way to be. It always comes from, somewhat, I think, a lack of faith. When I feel that welling up inside of me and things get tight and you want to clamp onto things, that a lot of times that's just about not having a lack of faith in the Lord and say, God, you're going to handle it. You can take care of things. I think we got tested a little bit with faith this last week, right? Because you just didn't know, right? Here comes the hurricane, and 1 minute it's a Cat 5, and it's pounding our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas, and there's so many good people, they're banding together now, and they're getting boats, and they're getting planes and taking supplies over and stuff. There's great organizations that have solid delivery systems that have done this multiple times, like Samaritan's Purse. That's one of the organizations we support. That's why we say if you want to give money to this, I would give it through them because we can trust the results of what they do. Sometimes we want to help and we jump on a boat and we ride down there and we're like, okay, well, what do I do with it now? It's good to have people that that are in it and are trusted and are good stewards. But our faith was tested this last week, and you see people get crabby when the storm comes. You think, now I'm going to tell you, just a little secret there, that we've had several storms since we've been here. My phone rings off the hook when the storm comes. I'm just going to tell you, and it's usually not about, oh, help me, because we had a storm. Usually it's because I'm so mad at so-and-so, and there's major conflict, believe it or not. And you're just sitting there going, really? Okay, there's a storm coming. It's going to decimate us, and you guys are worried about who bought bread. Okay, come on, man, really? But it's amazing how when things get tight and people get afraid, they try to take control of stuff. And you've got to watch out for that because that's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Today, we're going to talk about something very different. It's the critical people. And when I say critical people, you probably may have gotten a picture of somebody in your head when I say critical people, dealing with critical people. They always got something that's going wrong. They're the people, who all their posts this week were, I can't believe it didn't come. I put up all the shutters. Why did I have to put up the shutters if it did not come? I'm reminded of that when I see those posts. I'm reminded about folks a guy in the Old Testament named Jonah, and he came to bring a prophecy to a big city that was very evil. And then when the city repented, he got mad about it. He's like, God, I thought you were going to destroy them. I came all this way. You didn't, what? Come on. Kind of get things out in front. It's those people, they make criticism and they take it to an art form. There's something always wrong. Something always is a problem. They can't give you a compliment without there being something on the back. So you look great today, Mike, except for your hair. It's kind of like that. I'm kidding. You look awesome. You always do. But I'm just saying, it's things like that. That was a great decision except for everything that led up to it and everything that was behind it. Man, that was a wonderful song, except that one note. And there's always those people they can't even give a compliment without a criticism being behind it. And maybe we all have those people in our lives. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe you have a boss and he just rides you endlessly. There's nothing is ever good enough. Nothing's ever right. You may have said, I brought 15 new accounts into the fold this week. For our business. And he goes, yeah, but there was that one that ordered less than they normally do. Why couldn't you push the bigger product on them? And there's always something. There's always a criticism. Maybe it's a friend. And they just always in your, you didn't do that right. Oh, why'd you wear that today? I can't believe you wore that today. That looks terrible. Why didn't you wear this? Okay, your hair, why did you do it like that? That joke was not funny. I mean, over and over and over again, there's just criticism and criticism. Maybe it's your spouse. Yikes. Maybe your spouse is like, they're always criticizing you, always find the wrong thing with you. Maybe it's just someone you have to do business with every day, but maybe it's a friend at school. They always have a criticism. How do you deal with those people? How do you love them? I mean, I understand it. When church work is easy to criticize. The song was too loud. The song was too short. This was, it didn't last long enough. It was too soft. It was this. It was that. The sermon was too long. Those jokes aren't funny. Whatever you say, whatever you want to do. I heard that before. Somebody told me that once. You name it. You name it. I remember. I'll tell you a joke. This is a real story. Okay. I was at my first church. I got indoctrinated into the criticism early. Okay. My first church. I was youth pastor. Right. And we had worked there for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and God had, I was going to move to another church and move more into a worship ministry type role and leave kind of the youth ministry behind. And I said, but we were coming up on Easter, and I was like, okay, but we've got this big Easter cantata, so man, I'm not going to bug out before Easter, so we're going to stay through Easter, which was like a month. It was like a month, wasn't it? Or 5 weeks, month, something like that. To get through Easter, and we're going to get the choir through the Easter thing and all that, and that was fine for the first 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, it started going sour. I was going sour. I had a friend of mine tell me, you should have just 2 weeks and gone, but you didn't. So I stayed, and then people started to get upset because they were going through those stages of grief. First it was, Jim's leaving. Now it's like, I can't believe he's leaving. And I had a call one day, and they called me on the phone at the office, and I'm going, hello, how you doing? It's like, I can't believe you're in the office. Every time I drive by the church, your truck is gone. You're never working for us. You're just out gallivanting around the neighborhood. I was crushed. I'm trying to work hard. I'm trying to finish well. I'm staying here to help. The other churches pressure me to come, but I feel like I want to finish well where I'm at. And until God, it was almost like God just said, okay, I'm going to help you out with this, Jim. And I got another phone call the next day. Kid you not. Another lady, totally different set. She said, I know you're at the office. Every time I drive by there, your truck is there. You're never out in the community helping us. Back to back. It's a place. Criticism comes. If you do anything, Aristotle said, I love this quote. He said, look, to avoid criticism, do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And I think that's not going to work because then they'll call you lazy. Or unopinionated, or you're not a leader, or whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be criticism. People, if you live long enough, you're going to deal with criticism. And which isn't a bad thing completely. If you can't ever see anything wrong with you, then you're never going to improve and get better, A lot of times, I had a pastor tell me one time, long time ago, he said, look, just don't, he said, the worst thing you can do is use this is just me, to never improve. Okay? So you have to be able to prove. We all need to grow. We all need to get better, but we're not talking about just simple critique. We're talking about a critical spirit that dwells inside of criticism and just lives there. The truth is, if you follow Jesus, he was criticized. So if you follow him, you're going to be criticized. You're also probably going to be criticized by people that you think are cool. Or the people that you respect. It could happen. It's going to come along. You'll be criticized by good people. Some people won't understand what God's telling you to do. They won't get it. They'll take it out on you. It'll happen. It's going to happen at some point. But the truth is you have to stay true to what God told you, because here's the truth about criticism. Criticism is always just an opinion. It may be a good one, and you may need to listen to it, or it may be a bad one. But see, there's dangers here. Our tendency is always we take whatever's bad and we magnify it to like the greatest nth level. I am the worst at that. If anything, Jim, your button's unbuttoned. Oh gosh, somebody didn't get saved. I didn't button that part of my shirt. What was I thinking? I can't believe this. Why did I do that? I'm the worst at that. I'm going to say I'm the worst. There's probably people worse than me, but I'm real bad at it because Katie will tell you, if the one thing goes wrong, that grass. There's a blade that I didn't run over with. I left a strip. Oh my gosh. That just ruined my whole lawn and everything. I can be manicured everything else, but that can be a problem. That critical spirit, you've got to watch it. Yeah, she's laughing like, I'm sorry. But anyway, so of course, I scalped the lawn yesterday, just so you know. There's a thing behind it. I scalped it. I set it down like 2 more settings. I was like, okay, it's a little bit high. I'm going to set it down, boy. And I just like, I scalped it. It was nice and green. Now it's like yellow. That's what's up. So it doesn't, it's true. I know, and it's driving me nuts too. It's there. There's always something that you can be critical about. And the bad thing about it is there's a danger to having a critical spirit. Do you realize that? I want to take you to some scripture that we don't normally talk about when we talk about critics. We just talk, we do a little bit, but not probably in this vein that we've talked about before, but it's in Matthew chapter 7. Okay, if you want to turn there, it's Matthew chapter 7. We'll be reading verses 1 through 5. And I'm going to show you some dangers to having a critical spirit out of these verses. So if you want to follow along on Facebook as well. Let's go ahead and hop over to Matthew 7. Verse 1 says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" Verse 4 says this, "How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye?" Did you just love that imagery? The plank sticking out of someone's eye. Let me help you get that. I got news for you. If somebody's going after my eye, I want you to have the clearest vision that has ever been. Don't put your fingers around my eye unless you're really good at it. And verse 5 says, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Now, what we're going to see here is there is a danger. There's many dangers to having a critical spirit. The first thing you see in that first verse is not in the list that I gave you up there, Adam, but it's that the way that you criticize others is the way that the depth that you criticize others is the depth they'll criticize you. So, if you're just picking everybody apart about everything, Lord knows you have no grace to make a mistake. You don't. And I'm going to tell you this too. This is even further. This is something I learned in college. When I was in college, I was real good at picking on people, and finding their flaws and making jokes about it and stuff. And I thought it was really funny because I make people laugh. Basically, I was just being a jerk and talking about folks was all I was really doing. I was like, hey, look what they're wearing, blah, blah, blah. Well, over a period of time, and everybody would laugh, and I would think that was funny, and I would gain a little self-esteem, I guess, with that. And, after a while, I started realizing that, man, I was getting worried about what I looked like all the time, or what I said, and I was feeling like really constricted. All of a sudden, I realized, your own critical spirit that you have for others, now it's turning back on you. And you think everybody is just like you. Everybody is just looking for the flaw. And now you can't even walk down a hall without being self-conscious because of your own critical spirit. The way you judge others is the way how you critique others, how critical you are with others is how critical they will be with you, and it's also how critical you will be with yourself. But there's some real dangers. The critical spirit is a barrier, okay? A critical spirit is a barrier. One, it's a barrier to to community in your life. You know that? Because no one wants to be around, the Oscar the Grouch or Angela from The Office. Nobody wants to hang out with those people because they're just a problem, I don't want to be around Sad Sack or Eeyore because everything's wrong. You can't have any fun in life because there's always a problem. Nobody wants to hang out with those people. It's tough. It's a barrier to the community in your life. It's also, critical spirit is a barrier to God's growth in your life. In this passage, the person that it's talking to, they're running right past the biggest problem in their life, this giant plank that's a problem in their eye, and trying to pick something out of somebody else's eye. Spiritual help like this is a lot. A lot of times we think, okay, I'm going to deny myself. I'm going to go help somebody. You may be hurt. Let's say you're physically hurt, and you're going to help somebody move something, right? And you probably shouldn't be out there moving it, but you can tough it out and go through. That's the way I was raised. My dad, you just You tough it out and you get over it, that type of a thing. But spiritual help is very different. Well, physical really isn't that much, but spiritual especially is different. Like when you're on an airplane and they talk about the mask, you see the people you're flying and the stewards, they talk about, here's the mask drops down. Let's say you're traveling with a child or someone needs help. What are you supposed to do? You put it on you first, then you help the other person. Now, some people just want to put it on the other person, but the reason you put it on yourself first is because if it's taking you a while to put it on the other person, the cabin pressure might drop, you may not have oxygen, and you may not be able to help. You may pass out and not be able to help them before you get stuff on. You have to take care of yourself first. And in this situation, when you have a critical spirit and you're always running to the problems in somebody else, you run right past your own. And the truth is when we help others spiritual, the thing that we have to understand is that gets in the way of our growth, because God's like going, I need to move this out of your life so that you can become better, so that you can grow. And what it also does, it's also a barrier to your ability for God's growth in other people. Because what's the point when we talk about that story? The point of you getting the plank out of your eye is so that you can help the other person remove the speck from theirs. We always tell that story like it's okay, you got the plank in your eye, then you live in your sin, I'm going to live in mine, leave me alone. But that's not the point of that proverb. That's not the point of that parable. The point of that parable is, look, you need to try to clear your mind, clear your heart, clear your relationship with Christ of sin and keep that clean so that you can help somebody else in love and in truth. Because the truth is, you think of a plank sticking out of your eye. First, it's hard to see, like I said, to pick the speck out of the other. But can you imagine as you're trying to get close to somebody to pull that speck out, and that plank's just whopping them in the head, and you're just causing all kind of damage. There's a lot to do with, there's a lot of that in our own hearts. When we try to help people and then our lives are not straight with God, it gets in the way. It makes it hard for us to do it. And sometimes we'll say things that are not spirit directed to someone, and it'll tear them up. It'll cause more problems. So it's important for us to keep, when we have a critical spirit, it gets in the way. It hurts our community in our life. It hurts God's growth in our life, and also hurts what God's trying to grow in others, really sometimes through us. But I'm going to tell you something else. Critical spirit is also a thief. Let me tell you what a critical spirit steals. The first thing a critical spirit steals is your focus. Critical spirit will steal your focus. Paul wrote to the Hebrews in Hebrews 12:2. It said, let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, on whom our faith depends from beginning to end. If I have a critical spirit and all I can see is the problems and all I spend my life is I'm just fix it, I'm going to fix that, 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 I'm going to fix that. And that's really, I'm just being honest with you, that's a temptation to me. One of my biggest things when I'm in the downest time, when I'm in the downtime, my wife will tell you, when I'm just having a hard time, maybe when I'm counseling people and things are going hard, or maybe just have a friend or a neighbor that's going through a tough thing, I'll be so frustrated with Katie, and I'm like, I can't fix it. And I struggle with that. The point is, it's not my job to fix. That's one thing God's trying to teach me, but put me in those situations. It's His job. My job is to trust Him and obey Him and love others and respect others and be who I'm supposed to be with Him. Sometimes deliver the hard words. A lot of times back off and shut my mouth or open it in prayer. That's what my job is. My job is not to fix everyone else. But it takes my focus off of Jesus when I put it on the problems. Because here's the thing. You become what you focus on. Realize that? When you focus on everything that's negative in the world, you become negative. I've shared with you guys before, there's times I struggle with depression. And that's one of the things I start seeing when depression is starting to set in. It's one of the triggers that I know. I start getting a whole real complaining. Everything's terrible. I don't enjoy anything. There's always a problem. That was a great, funny movie, but you know what? I didn't like the shot over there about 30 minutes in, with about 2 seconds. There was a frame that was off or something. I become a more critical person. It's less able to enjoy things because my focus is now on the problems. It's not on being grateful for the things that God has for me. It's hard to be thankful to God. It's hard to give thanks in everything, like it says like Paul wrote for us to do, if all we look at are the problems. You know, not only does it steal your focus, it steals your joy. I can't be happy. I can't experience joy when all I see are the things that are horrible and negative and wrong. I can't do that. You know, when you're looking at the negative, it stifles your joy. You're rarely happy. It's hard to give thanks. You know, you spend your energy, because you're spending so much of your energy on all the things that are wrong. It's a good thing to stop wherever you are at some point in your week and list the things that are going well in your life. It's a good thing because God gave those things. And I'm going to be honest with you, even the things that are not going well, God is allowing them to be a part of your life, because if you follow him through that, he's going to produce some good things on the other side of that in your life and in the lives of people around you. You know, it's also, you know, it steals your victory. You know, in Matthew, the person is literally, in this passage, they're literally running past the very area that God needs to work in their life, trying to point out the problems of others. And they're sacrificing their own personal victory in their spirit. And because the truth is here, and this is what you have to understand. When we deal with critical people, it's so hard, you know, they're just complain. You know, that's hard to deal with. You know, you're always wrong. That's tough. But what we have to understand is critical people also have a hard time being criticized because they are most critical of themselves. A lot of times when you criticize someone or when you have to correct someone who is critical, they always have a reason why it was somebody else's fault. Or it was that situation. It's not me. It's not my, you rarely hear the word, that's on me. That's just my fault. That's me. I'm sorry. I blew it. I absolutely blew it. You don't hear that much from critical people because they have to have a reason. Because here's the thing. When they aren't criticizing others, their critical spirit, much like the story I told you, turns on themselves. And they are the hardest on themselves than they are of anybody. So they are always on the lookout for things that are difficult, things that are wrong. You know, the reason that when there's nothing to criticize, it's just all back on them. So you may think, man, that's dangerous. That's a tough way to be. But how do I respond to them? Because the truth is, if somebody's in your life, God has put them there for you to love them and to be a light from him to them. How do you deal with that? You know, I mean, my wife, there's times, you know, when I'm grumpy and stuff, and she'll call me, it's like a porcupine person. It's trying to hug a porcupine. You know, I want to hug that, but it's every time they're just grumpy. You know, it's hard to do. It's hard to do successfully. So how do we hug the porcupine in our lives? Well, one of the ways a lot of it's how we respond to them as well. One thing that you need to understand, sometimes, let me give you 4 ways to respond to it. And I wish I could take credit for this. Heard this off a leadership podcast. It was awesome. So I thought I'm just going to share that with you. But it says here's 4 ways that you can respond to critical people. First thing, number 1 is maybe you don't respond at all. Sometimes you just don't respond. You know, you look at Jesus. I mean, so many times he was totally right throughout his life. I mean, he lived a life that was sinless. And continually, even his own followers, even those close to him, complained about why he did this. Oh, I'm going to go down the cross. No, you're not. Remember we talked about Peter 2 weeks ago? And the controlling nature. No, you're not going to do that. That's not going to work. You're not going to let everybody else. In Peter's mind, Jesus was letting all the critics win. If you go to the cross, no, you're supposed to lead a revolution. I mean, you're supposed to bring the kingdom of God here to earth, and that's going to happen. It's not going to happen if the Pharisees and the Romans win. And Jesus was like, no, that's not what he responded at that point, but sometimes Jesus didn't. You look in 1 Peter 2:23. You know, it says, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. That took some faith. That took some security. You know, there's a book Andy Stanley wrote called The Next Generation Leader, and I read it several years ago. But one of the marks of that book that stuck out to me was there was a time that his dad is also a pastor, Charles Stanley, and Andy was in a meeting where people were attacking his dad. And he said his dad would not respond. I mean, he was talking about one meeting. It's happened more than once. But in one meeting, he said someone punched my father. You know, and I'm going, Dad, why aren't you standing up for yourself? Why aren't you doing something? And his dad told him, said, look, my job is to obey God and leave the results to him. Sometimes there's just nothing to be said. You don't need to respond. You know, Proverbs 19:11 says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. And maybe somebody's being just hypercritical of you, and you just are like, okay, I'm just going to, if it's not going to be helpful to me, I'm just going to rise above that and love them anyway. You know, the second thing is, the way to respond is sometimes you respond, but you respond carefully. You respond carefully. Not react instinctively. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference. Respond and react. React, you're sitting there. Okay, counterpunch. You know, I mean, you're ugly, your mama dresses you funny. Oh, yeah, well, you smell and your breath is nasty. Okay, you know, I mean, no, I'm going to counterpunch them, around hook you. You know, I mean, I had two aunts, and they were great, two great aunts, and they were the most awesome people. They loved me. They would help. They would come to my house, my mom's house, and help my mom do stuff and everything. But they were some of the most critical people. They'd just pick you apart. Jim, I hate your hair. Your hair's too long. Don't like that earring. I mean, I didn't see that one coming. Yeah, of course, But they're like 85 years old. I'm walking around with like the dangly earrings on. They're like, it's like your earring, I mean, one time my aunt, I was walking through the kitchen. She goes, yeah, you're getting fat, Jim. Oh, yeah? I said, and I had enough at this point. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to get Mom's tape measure off the sewing machine, and we'll just have a waist measuring contest. And my mother saw it coming because she's like, oh, no, Jim, don't do that. Jim, don't do it. And I was just not being obedient. So I went and got it, and I measured my waist, and I measured her waist. I was like 33. Okay, come on. I would kill for 33 these days, Oh, my goodness. I take a picture every day with something around 33. Ha, 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 ha. Y'all would be so tired of my Facebook feed. It'd be 33 inches, still 33, whoop, 32.75, look out. That's what I'd be. I took that picture. My waist was smaller. And I was like, aha, gotcha. Didn't fix a thing. Still critical. Just jump to the next thing. It didn't matter. I felt bad. I felt bad at the end of the day, but I just had enough. Some people are just going to be, sometimes you respond, but you don't respond the way I did. You respond carefully. You don't react instinctively. There's a story in Judges 8 in verses 1 and 2. And let me share this with you. It says, now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian? And they challenged him vigorously, okay? He'd gone out to fight the Midianites, and he'd call these guys and like, hey, we thought we were on your side. Why didn't you call us? You didn't do this right. They challenged him vigorously. But he answered them. What he did was he provided the context of the story to them. Sometimes your critic needs a context to the criticism so that they can better understand it. And that's what he did. He said, hey, here's the situation. Here's what happened. And it said in verse 3, said, when the men of Ephraim heard Gideon's answer, their anger subsided. Their anger subsided. Sometimes you need to provide the context. Sometimes the critical person just needs the info to shape their opinion. They don't know. They don't have all the info. Sometimes they don't need to know all the info. That's one thing you learn as a pastor. Sometimes people criticize you and you know things that they don't know. And you can't share those things that they don't know because those are incompetence somewhere else. And that wouldn't help anybody except you, and that's self-serving, so you just take the criticism and you move on. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry for anything I've done that could help you feel that way. But it just is what it is. And you move on. Sometimes, because here's the thing you have to understand as well. When that friend unleashes on you for no reason, that coworker that just picks you apart. And even kids, when your parents are just riding you, it's just like, we're not do anything right here, when they're just riding you, you have to understand something. Sometimes the criticism really isn't about you, Sometimes a critical spirit is often a sign of a hurt in their own life. Hurt, fear, pain, a scar. And a lot of times a critical person will say those things to you because they have experienced the pain of what this seems to start to look like. And they desperately don't want you to have to deal with it. And they're just not doing it in a good way. And that's what you have to understand. Sometimes we need to learn, instead of being defensive to criticism, to try our best to respond with compassion. Because they may be trying to help us. They're responding from hurt and pain, and we need to be careful, in the way that we respond to people. I'm going to tell you something. When emotions are high, wisdom is low. So don't hit send. When you type that email out and you're just fired up, and wow, that's a good one. Oh man, I'm going to bold and underline that. That's going to be great. No, I'm going to just make the font bigger because that's just the get you line of all get you lines. I'm going to just nail them down. And here's all my stats, and I've got a graph, and everything. And I've got like a table, and it's all stuff. And I am right. Woo! I am fired up. Don't hit send, because when emotions are high, wisdom is low. Wait. I can't tell you how many documents I have of emails or responses that I've written that I put back in a folder on my, I probably need to delete them for anybody ever finds them. Oh my gosh. Put it back in a folder that I've said, okay, I'm going to wait 3 days, and then I'm going to read this again. If I feel the same way about this, and I feel that's good, I'm going to probably let Katie read it at that point before I send it. I'm going to do that, so that nothing gets out that shouldn't be there. I'm going to go that route. But those are the type of things I need to respond with compassion. Occasionally, also look at this. You respond by changing. A hard, nasty critic or a critic that loves you very much, sometimes they're right, and you're just wrong. And you need to just go, yep, that's my fault. You're right. And you need to respond by changing. Look, if you're getting the same criticism from every person, from all walks of life. Now, I'm not talking about 5 people that hang out together and talk about you, but I'm talking about from all kinds of areas. Your mom, at work, this guy over here, your friends over here. Boy, this is just you. At some point, they're probably right. And you need to make a change in what you're doing. It's always good to have people that can call you on the carpet. I've got a list of guys. I think about Randy, I think about Scott, I think about Bob. I think about, guys that I will say, hey, this is me. Do you see this in my life? Because I know the reason people get on that list is because in the past, they've read me the riot act in love, so I know they're going to give me the straight poop. But I also know they love me, and they're still with me after years. So I listen to that. That's hard. It's hard. Sometimes it's difficult because that's a tough place to be. But sometimes you respond by changing. If your spouse who loves you, you're yelling at the kids too much. Maybe you're yelling at the kids too much. It can happen. And then you have to go back and you need to correct and apologize and change. There have been, in Proverbs 15:31 and 32 says, if you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. But if you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. Sometimes you just need to change. There have been times that I've heard criticism that I needed to hear, and it's the best thing ever. It's been the hardest thing to hear. But it's been straight up. The fourth way that you respond is the fourth thing about responding. It's really not a way you respond, but it's something that you always need to do when dealing with a critical person and a critical spirit is this. You always work to guard your heart. Okay? We are negative people, I think. If we hear criticism, we're most apt. I don't know about you, but I'm more apt to just go, yeah, that's me. Somebody looks at me and goes, Jim, you're an axe murderer. And Katie will tell you, I'll brood about it for a while. I'll come back to Katie and go, well, I used to chop wood. It's obviously, so there's probably, and she goes, Jim, pull yourself out of that. That's nuts. You're not an axe murderer. But sometimes you need to guard your heart. Much like wise words bring healing. Excuse me. The critical words of a critical heart bring sickness. Proverbs 12:18 says, some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Look, and the reason you need to guard your heart, and this is very true, is a critical spirit can be contagious. In fact, it's highly contagious. When someone criticizes you, what do you want to do? You criticize something else. You start looking at the down things on everything else. This is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. Can't stand this. This ain't right. Why they do this? I can't believe it. Okay, and if you don't criticize someone else, here's what you'll do. You'll turn around and you'll start criticizing the criticizer. Well, they criticize me. Well, let me tell you 15 things wrong with their life. And you'll look at the specks all in their life, and you may have missed the plank in yours. It's a scary, dangerous place to be. But you have to guard your heart. You have to guard your heart. You know, sometimes, I can be overly critical. That's something I struggle with. It does. And I'm going to tell you, I've told you before, I've struggled with depression at past in my life, at times. That's one, and I said earlier, that's one of the triggers. It's when you start to become overly critical. You've got to guard your heart. You've got to guard your heart when you deal with that. The more you yield to a critical spirit, the more the joy in your life subsides. Because when you start looking exclusively through the lens of criticism, it's a dark, dark hole. She's an idiot. I can't believe she wore that. My boss is a moron. That coach should be fired. Hey, I'm just being honest. Just calling it like I see it. I'm just saying. Those are all the trigger words of someone who is bored into criticism. Let me share with you something that Paul wrote that's extremely important. It's Romans, it's in the Bible, so it's obviously important, but it's important to this topic. In Romans 14, verse 10, he said to them, why do you condemn another believer? Why do you look down on another believer? Remember, we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. It's not my job to pick you apart and tell you everything that's wrong with you and make you just hyper. That's not my job. I'm going to stand before the judgment seat of God, and God's going to judge what I've done. We are trying to help, to love, to uplift, to encourage each other. He goes on even further in verse 13. He says, so let's stop condemning each other. Let's decide instead to live in such a way that you will not cause another believer to stumble and fall. Look, I'm just going to be truthful with you. If you want to find something wrong with somebody, you can do it. You can spend 20 minutes with me and you'll find 1,000 things wrong if you really want to find them. It won't take much. Too fat, too short, no hair, bad sense of humor, shares too much, talks too much, doesn't talk enough, scatterbrained, ADD, name it. You're going to find something wrong. Our sinful nature just gives us a super ability to find the negative in another person, but that's not our job. Jesus didn't say, look, they'll know who you follow by how well you criticize their faults. He says they'll know who you follow by how well you love each other. Our job is to love each other. When we come into the room, we should be bringing the light of Jesus. We should be encouraging each other to be better. People should be built up by our words, not torn down. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:11. I'll tell you, the best boss I ever had, the guy who got me probably better than anybody in my life, was James Nance. And I went to work in seminary, and I had to get a job when I got to seminary, because you find out when you go to school, at some point the money you worked up to save runs out. That's just what happens. You use things and there's none coming in. Okay, it goes out. Okay, so I had to get a job. So I got this job working for $5 an hour as a media assistant at this large church who had a TV ministry. And it was an act of God for me to even get the job to begin with, because I had no experience with video and stuff like that. Now, I do that all the time. But then I had no experience with it at all, and in fact, there were two other guys I knew that interviewed for the job that both had broadcast TV degrees. So I shouldn't have got the job, and James called me. He said, look, man, I'm going to hire you. I don't know what it is. I know they're more qualified, but God, I'm prayed about it. God said, I'm going to hire you, and so he did. And James would show me how to do stuff, and then he would let me do it and make some mistakes. But James would also, one of the biggest things he did was he always complimented the things that I got right. He always praised what I did right. And it was amazing how I started spending more and more time in it, more and more time doing stuff. I remember we went to, we would break down the whole TV studio. This is back in the 90s. This is like 20-something years ago, 24, 25 years ago. We would do a youth camp at our church and have about 300 kids there and stuff, and we would break down the TV studio and do videos all week, and we have video in the service and all. They do it all the time now, but it wasn't being done as much back then. we did all these camp news and all this crazy stuff that we would do. And we have music videos of the day. That's very common now, but it wasn't then. And I remember one day I took all the scraps. Somebody else was editing all that, but I took the scraps and I was just playing around in the thing, and I put the scraps of other people's videos and I put it to a song that I liked. And I said, hey, James, you like this? And he's like, dude, that's awesome. That's your job now. And he showed it that night in the service, like the little video. And I was like, wow, it was Wes, whatever. I can't remember his name, but it was the song. I mean, I can hear it in my head. But it was awesome. But the song, not some of my video, it was okay, but it worked. But, it became, but that became my job. And from there, I started working on editing the TV program. I started doing technical directing on the program itself. I started writing my own commercials. I started recording my own music for the commercials and stuff like that. And we were playing these on a major Christian station and stuff. And he just was, that's great, Jim, do that. Oh, that's really good. Make sure you do that more. And I remember this so vividly, and I flourished. Probably one of the greatest flourishes that I've ever had in my life professionally was under his tutelage. And most of it was not because I was perfect, but he took the things that were positive and said, I want you to magnify those things. I want you to do more of what you're doing that's good. And I grew. And I think that's a lot of how we should be with people. It's easy to find the wrong, but Ephesians 4:29 tells us that we should use our words that are good for building up, to give grace for those who hear. Are your words grace-giving or the judgment-making? Now, we've talked a lot about it, but, how do we overcome that? Because we're all sensitive to that, right? We're all sensitive when someone criticizes. How do we overcome an oversensitization to that? I'm going to tell you how it does. It all comes back to this. It comes back to identity. Yeah, you have to know who you are, but more important than knowing who you are, you need to remember whose you are. You're God's. And ultimately, the criticism that you need to listen to either comes through someone from him, or comes directly from him, or comes in the Word, but it's always got to be pointing back to him. That's where you need to be listened to, because that's who you're going to answer to. The only criticism that you ultimately need to listen to originates from the Creator, and it's meant to make you prosper. It's called conviction. Conviction is something that it takes you where you are, and it says you can be better. Condemnation says you're the worst at this, and you're the worst I've ever seen, and you've got no hope. That's the two differences in those things. Okay? Conviction is from God. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. God wants to prosper you. He wants to make you better. He wants to take the guy who could not program a VCR, literally, 6 months before I got that job with James, I tried to program a VCR and failed miserably. He wants to take the guy who can't do that and then make him somebody who he can say, look what I did. A testament to his glory. He wants to take you and make you something greater than you believed you could be, but that he always intended. And he wants you to shine for him. Shine for him and be a testament of what God can do. Now, as we close, for the Christian, you may have realized, hey, man, I am given over to a critical spirit. Maybe you're like me, and that's where you can go really fast. And you can get in that hole, and everything's wrong. And maybe you need to stop and you need to think, okay, look, I need to back off of some of that. And you need to realize that you need to focus on Jesus. Rather than focusing on what's wrong with everybody else around you, you need to focus on Christ and go, look, what do I need to become? Maybe that's what you need to be. Maybe you've been held captive by someone who has a critical spirit, and you're worried about pleasing them or over pleasing them, even over pleasing God. I'm more worried. If you have that person in your life, I'm just going to make sure that they're okay, and they almost supersede God because you just don't want them to criticize you. If that's when you want to please people more than you want to please God, that's called idolatry. It's called idolatry. God needs to have that first part in your life. But here's the thing. I talked about it's important to know your identity, about who you are, whose you are. It's hard to deal with a critical person when you don't have a stable foundation on your own. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you don't have that stable foundation, you're going to have a hard time dealing with the criticisms of others. It's hard enough with Jesus. It's near impossible without him. And what I mean by that is that we realize one of the greatest things in the world about becoming a Christian is realize that I am flawed. I am so flawed beyond repair on my own. Yes, I am a hot mess. You know, a hot mess is a theological point. Do you realize that? We all are. But God knew it. And he said, I love you anyway. And he sent his son who was fully God and fully man. And Jesus who came here, he was not a hot mess. He was everything right. And he lived that way. And he never made a mistake. And though the Bible says the wages of sin is death, my sin should be death on me. He committed no sin, and he took my death on him and then said, look, if you'll join with me, connect with me, I will help you go through this life. And I will help you grow and flourish and become what I've helped you to be. You will shine my glory to other people and point praise to me. And at the end of your life, you'll come and live with me in heaven. That is the gospel. When I realize that I am a hot mess, I have sinned against you, God, and everybody has. And I recognize that. And I said, God, I want to give my life to you, though. My way doesn't work. I want to try yours. That is the wonderful nature of the gospel. And that's where our foundation comes when we have that relationship with Jesus. I know whose I am. Do you know whose you are today? Have you made a decision, a conscious decision in your life at some point where you said, I am going to forsake the way I'm doing it and I'm going to follow Jesus? And you realized, just was honest about it. I'm messed up. I have sin in my life. God and I are at odds. I've made mistakes, things I'm not proud of. And I will never fix those. But I'm going to trust God to forgive them and God to make them right and turn those tragedies into trophies. Because he will do that in your life. Has there been a time that you've done that? If there hasn't, maybe today is the day that there needs to be.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Please feel free to check us out at baywestchurch.org.